All right, so I will let Natalia start, and this is our final talk of the workshop, and then right after this, we'll be having a discussion for like a 30-minute discussion, and that will be the end. So take it away, Natalia.
Thanks a lot. So I'll be talking about efficiency here. I think we've been all incredibly efficient in this workshop, working hard and also reaping the benefits. But I focus here on word order. And I'll talk about word order flexibility, case marking, semantic use, and different trade-offs between them. Right, so I'll start with the definition, very informal one, of communicative efficiency, and then I'll focus on the trade-off between case morphology and word order and other factors, actually. And then I present some data and results based on corpora, of course, and I'm using UD corpora, corpora of subtitles and film subtitles, as well as online news corpora. So they are annotated with the UD annotation tools that you have already heard of during this workshop. Then I also talk about token-based gradient measures that I derived from those corpora, so including entropy for word order flexibility, and also some other measures for case marking and semantic fit between lexemes and arguments and something else. And then I'll demonstrate some exploratory analysis because my data sample is not really big, doesn't allow me to run a proper analysis, a regression, or do other hypothesis testing things. But yeah, it's a work in progress, so all suggestions will be really appreciated. So communicative efficiency is actually a very well known and actually old idea, but it just known under different names. And so most people would agree, at least in functional linguistics, that language users try to maximize the benefit to cost ratio in communication. And when doing so, they tend to save effort that is required for processing and articulation. And the manifestations of this principle of communicative efficiency includes dependency length minimization that we've heard of already, then as well as markedness phenomena. For example, singular is more frequent and less frequently marked than plural, which is more less frequent, or Zipf's law of abbreviation, according to which more frequent words tend to be shorter. And this is something that we can even trace in real life if you now listen to what kind of words people use to talk about coronavirus or COVID-19. So, for example, Australian language English speakers call it Rona, and Dutch and German say Corona. Others use COVID, CD, the virus, and so on. So they use a lot of strategies to make the language use more efficient and shorten this expression. Right, but here I want to focus on another, very well known, well, I would say famous topic, that's the trade-off between word order and case marking. So this is, again, an old idea that goes back already to Sapir and others who say that a rigid word order, fixed word order, basically plays the role of case marking if there is no case marking in this language. For example, in English and Mandarin Chinese, there's a fixed word order and no case marking, while Czech and Lithuanian, for example, have a rich morphology and more flexible word order. And it has been shown by Kausinimaki that there is a statistical trade-off in case marking and word order of core arguments, and there are other corpus-based studies. So this has been interpreted as evidence of efficiency and the principle of least effort. Now, one problem with this is that actually word order and case marking are only two types of cues that help us understand who did what to whom. We can also name verb agreement. For example, in Dutch, a verb agreement may play an important role because there is neither fixed word order of subject and object nor case marking. And another, well, I would say supporting device to help in interpretation may be the use of lexical verb, the position of lexical verb in the middle between subject and object. So this idea, I think, goes back to Hawkins. He developed that view. And so if the subject occurs to the immediate left from the verb and the object to the immediate right, then this verb acts as an anchor. So, and it's believed to help in processing and deciding what actually happened. So there are, of course, other factors. For example, extra-linguistic context. If we see what's going on, we might not need any other cues, and it can be easier to understand, interpret the utterance. So we can speak about grounding effects. For example, Lestrade and de Hoop, in their paper on differential subject marking in Hindi and other languages, hypothesized that if the argument function of event participants can be determined on the basis of information available in the here and now, and here they speak about the present tense and past tense distinction, then the use of case marking can be judged redundant and suspended because of economy. So there's also local predictability of particular situations, something we know from encyclopedic context knowledge. For example, it's usually a dog that bites a man and not the other way around. And this has been shown to matter for example, Japanese object marking. And one can also name global semantic and pragmatic features of subjects and objects. For example, so this is some data from 5 spoken corpora in English, Lao, an African language, Russian, and Ruli. And so the data show that then non-lexical arguments, pronouns mostly, first and second person arguments, animate NPs, definite and given NPs, they are more likely to be agents than patients, and A than P, subjects and objects. So all this shows that there is a lot of information that can help the listener or recipient to understand the message. In this study, I only focus on 4 parameters. These are word order, case marking, semantic or lexical cues, and the presence of the verb, tendency to put the verb in the middle position in the language. Here I use kind of innovative methodology by deriving all these values, all these measures from corpora only, though, so it's different from what people usually do. They look at grammars and get these categorical values from grammars usually. And so I'll show exploratory correlation analysis between these measures. Now, let me tell you a few words about the corpora that I used. So I already said that I used the universal dependencies corpora. Here I only took 20. So from Arabic to Vietnamese, very diverse, or as diverse as possible. And then I also took 20 online use corpora, 1 million sentences in each. I used the Leipzig corpora collection. So these corpora are freely downloadable. You can check the links at the bottom of this page. So I also used subtitles, film subtitles in 13 languages, representing 5 films of different genres from the party corpus. And I annotated the online use and subtitles with UDPipe using the R package UDPipe. So of course, it will be interesting to try other tools like Spacey or other annotating tools, but yeah, so far the more languages one has, the more time consuming it gets. So you probably all know already um, about the universal dependencies annotation. So it's based on dependency grammar, and so there's a root. Usually, it's the verb, and this verb has dependencies, and for example, the subject and such, and the object. Like here, a node is depends on the object. So these are kind of core arguments, and so there's also obliques and others, but I'm not looking at those here. Oops. So now what did I do with this corpora? I derived these token-based gradient measures. So there are 4 of them. I'll just walk you through them. First of all, the variability of subject and object order was measured as Shannon entropy, and we've discussed it a lot already during this workshop. So maybe I don't have really to explain it. So basically, I computed the proportions of subject followed by object and object followed by subject, taking only common nouns here in the transitive clause. And then I computed this entropy. And so the higher entropy, the greater the variability. And so it means we can't really predict which kind of order one would use, just without any context. Right, now I was also interested in comparing different registers and text types. And here I kind of did a sanity check. I took entropy in the UD corpora, so which are kind of should be correctly annotated. And I also computed entropy based on the corpora of online news, which are very messy, and the parsers don't always perform very well. But yeah, I was very happy to see that there is a strong positive correlation, and there were no big surprises really with English and Indonesian in both corpora having low scores, and Lithuanian, Tamil, Hungarian, and Czech having a lot of word order variation. I mean, subject and object only, of course. The only thing I have doubts about is that Chinese had pretty high entropy in the online news, and I suspect that their parser is not that good. So I will exclude Chinese, unfortunately, from the discussion of correlations. Right, and this shows the correlation between entropy in the UD corpora and entropy in subtitles here. And so there's still a strong positive correlation, though there is more variation. And for example, Russian is much less, has much less word order freedom. That's interesting in the subtitles than in the UD corpora, although Persian has more. So I don't know if there are any translate Chinese effects or any others. It would be interesting, of course, to look also at other types of texts. So now the next parameter is case marking. So I basically took all lemmas, nominal lemmas, from the UD corpora, and I also extracted their forms as the subject and object and subject and obt. And so if they overlapped, they were identical, then so that was then I didn't take that into account. And then if they had different forms, I mean, I computed the proportion of all those lemmas that had different forms. I hope that haven't confused you right now. And so I also took into account the positions and marked as a case as this dependency relation. And so because in order to compensate for different orthographic strategies in a language. Right, so this graph now here shows correlation between entropy, again, word order entropy on the horizontal axis, and on the vertical axis here, there's a distinct subject and object forms. So there's the percentage of lemmas that, the proportion of lemmas that are distinct. So this kind of is a proxy of case marking. So that Hungarian and Lithuanian and Japanese, actually, it's I think recent Japanese, I guess, then they have high distinctiveness. It means that so subject and object forms are different. And in English, Indonesian, as well as German, Dutch, and Vietnamese, the subjects and objects overlap formally. So, and in German, yeah, I know that there are cases, but I couldn't so far have managed to incorporate that as well, because they are not marked on nouns. They are somewhere else. Now, the next parameter is a semantic fit. How tightly the semantics of lexemes fits these core arguments on dependencies. So you probably heard about the fact that English has fewer semantic restrictions on the subject than German or Russian. And so they, for example, English allows locative, temporal, and instrumental subjects like 1979 witnessed 20 big firms go bankrupt. That's impossible in German, and other examples. So there seems to be less restrictions in English on what kind of nouns and semantic classes can be which terms. Okay. Then this relates to the tight distinction between tight and loose feet languages. So it has been argued that, shown that actually that languages like Korean, Japanese, Malayalam, Turkish, German, Russian are more on the tight fit, so with the really semantic restrictions on the arguments, words that can fill in these argument slots. And Chinese, Indonesian, and English are more on the loose side. And so then I tried to personalize that. Of course, I didn't have semantic classes and notation, but I had lexemes. I used them as proxies. So I used online use for this to extract this information, and I made lists of all transitive subjects and objects with common nouns. So I also treated compounds as one word in order to maximize cross-linguistic comparability, and so there was a matrix for each language with nouns and these roles and dependencies and such and opt and the frequencies of those nouns. Then and then on these matrices, I computed Kullback-Leibler divergence and mutual information, which are identical in this case. So I won't go into these mathematical details because I don't have time. I just give an illustration. So for example, if activist has 11 occurrences as subject and 1 as object, and add 7 each. And then if we consider that the dependencies are distributed in this way, 43% subject and 57 object, I mean nouns only, then if a language has loose feet, then most nouns will be like add. It can be either subject or object, so it's very close to this target distribution. And if a language has a tight feet, then most nouns are biased towards a particular role, like activist towards subject. Yeah. And so in first case, there will be low divergence, so mutual information, loose feet, and for tight feet, there will be high divergence, so mutual information. So, and so this represents a kind of counterintuitive probably results, with Japanese having the tightest fit, followed by Hindi and Russian. And then, but also have not only English and Indonesian would have, I would expect to have loose feet, but also Romanian and Turkish. That's really puzzling. But okay, so let's see where we get with that. And then, I also computed the proportion of lexical verb in the middle between subject and object, and that was really easy. Yeah, see that. So, but this is my last parameter, and now, so yeah, so in Indonesian, English, and Vietnamese, so this almost always the verb is between as subject and object, and in Japanese, Tamil, Persian, Turkish, almost never. So, and now finally the correlations. Then this parallelogram shows Spearman's correlations between different entropy measures. So entropy represents word order. So there's in the UD corpora, in the news, online news, in the subtitles. So this is word order. Then the distinct subject and object forms, which means distinctness of case marking. So this is the case marking parameter here, and they all are positively correlated. So which kind of corresponds to what we expect. So the more case marking, then the more variable word order can be. Then the tight fit, the semantic isn't really useful, and we only find a kind of weak correlation with the distinctiveness, although yeah, we would expect them to be negatively correlated, then it would be efficient, but I'll get back to that. And then there's also a negative correlation between this semantic fit and semantic tightness and the proportion of the verb in the middle. So that means that tight fit languages have a low proportion, and these are all verb final languages in my sample. And so these are partial correlations that kind of support these conclusions. And I'll just round up them with my with the discussion. So there is a trade-off between word order and case marking as expected. That's something that we know already, and that's I guess a manifestation of language efficiency. However, semantics of the subject and object doesn't really reduce case marking, so as the semantic cues. In fact, these semantic cues, their strength weakly correlates with this case marking and with distinct subject and object, and this is not efficient. So this kind of over-specifying who did what to whom. But both tight fit and semantic fit and case marking and also the languages, according to Hawkins and others, help to recognize the subject and object very early, and then to avoid reanalysis that might be really, really a huge cost for human language process. And so these are the results of these, how all these cues are correlated. And in the future, I would like to get more corporate for proper multivariate hypothesis testing and maybe perform causal analysis in order to see how these all these factors are related, what triggers what. So thank you very much.
All right, exciting. Thank you so much, Natalia. And do we have any questions? So I know we have some new attendees, so please feel free to use the raise hand function or enter your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. Okay, we one.
Hello, hi.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. That was a really, really exciting talk. And I would like to ask you if you have considered, instead of just relating with KLD, universal dependence relation, and lexeme, if you have tried to categorize lexeme, for instance, say, take humans and make a list of lexeme corresponding to humans, make a list of lexeme corresponding to animals, and something like that.
Yeah, that would be really great. Yeah, sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, it's okay, it's okay, go on. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, I think there's again a trade-off between quality and quantity, because like when I'm ready for 20 languages, it was pretty demanding and one has to check everything. And also I've done actually even some bottom-up clustering of semantic classes, and it's such a mess.
Yeah, sure.
I'm really afraid of this.
Yeah, maybe we can try using existing ontologies such as OntoNet or the named entity recognitions. I don't know.
Oh, that would be interesting. Yeah. Yes, if there are any resources for all these languages, that would be great.
Yeah, there are resources for most famous languages such as English and other European languages for ontologies. I mean. But,
yeah, right.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Next question from Peter. I'm gonna allow you to talk. Go ahead.
So, is it okay
Yes, yeah.
Great. Natasha, thank you very much for your talk, though sometimes it was a little bit too fast, so I couldn't get all the things I wanted. So I'd appreciate if you post your presentation somewhere. My question is, well, I've got the idea that well, it is relatively easy to count cases where subject and object were formally distinct, but I was wondering whether it might be useful sometimes to take into account that, well, there are languages like Lithuanian, for instance, where, well, if you are nominative, then you are subject. If you are accusative, then you are object, meaning that case marking identifies, pretty well identifies subjects and objects regardless of particular constructions, at least major constructions. But there are also languages like Hindi or Georgian or Tagalog where subjects and objects are distinct in each individual construction, but cases do not always identify a grammatical role by themselves. You have to, well, basically you have to wait for the verb to come, which then shows what the construction is, and then it helps to, and then you know which of the two case marked nominals were subject or object. So, well, for instance, the question could be whether you found, for instance, Hindi in any way special in your data, and whether it is possible to include languages such as Georgian or Tagalog, which are major languages and probably have some corpora of this kind. Thank
Yes,
you.
thanks. Yeah, so far I think that all languages are very special, and because of the amount of detail I have to look into and then to make sure that everything works smoothly. Yeah, I see it would be great to add Tagalog and Georgian. I think Tagalog is only represented by, I don't know, textbooks examples in the UD corpora, so I wouldn't take that, but or something similar. Georgians definitely would be interesting. I don't think there is now a good parser, at least I'm not aware of a Georgian one. I do have, I could easily find corpora, just pure unannotated text for these languages, but unfortunately, we have time, or maybe we can ask UD developers to give us this, so to preempt them, to push them a little bit. And yeah, definitely. So it's very biased towards the Indo-European languages and major languages, and yeah, only a small fraction of yeah, even word order types here as well. Yeah, thanks.
Zoe has a question. She said, very cool talk, Natalia. I have a question about semantic cues. I'm curious how MI is capturing semantics. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a proxy. I'm hoping at least, so that, for example, if there are any missing restrictions on the subject, then inanimate won't be subjects, for example, transitive subjects here. So that's words like activist that I showed would be subject, biased towards subject, and the words like box, table would not be. So that's just my hope. That it works. I also got some corroboration. I mean, I hope that it works properly because when I also run other studies and tried also including obliques and others, and this really this information divergence, the closely corresponds to what Hawkins and Fuller's also told about languages and their semantic fit, tight and loose fit. But yeah, so that's my hope that it approximates. And I also looked at some examples in the languages that I know there's a distribution of lexemes, and there I could see that, yeah, it kind of makes sense. But yeah, that's my answer.
So we have, thank you. So we're at the end of the time allotted just for this talk. There's a couple more questions that are in the chat. We can maybe transition to our general discussion, and maybe those questions will be relevant in general. So that's what I want to do now.